Oh, come in, come in. Oh, well done for finding me at home. A brief visit home before I set off for America tomorrow. But I'm just back from another trip to Ireland. I have to say, I love Ireland, both north and south. Of course, you found me in the wonderful Lewis Reading Room in Belfast at Queen's, but I've just been to Dublin. In fact, I bought this really beautiful. I finally went to the Peterson Pipe Shop, a sort of place of pilgrimage, and brought this lovely silver spigot, a system pipe. But yes, I've been very much reflecting on Lewis in Ireland, and I thought since we were in the Lewis room, we might have a little bit of Lewis. Do come and have a seat. Come and sit down. My memory is that it's probably almost 2 years now, when you first started coming round for these little visits, these little spells in the library, back in the other house, right in the midst of lockdown. One of the first things I read to you was from Lewis's The Voyage of the Dawntreader, because I love that book so much, and I think I read you the bit where Lucy finds a spell for the refreshment of the spirit, which turns out to be, this is a very nice Connemara whiskey, by the way. I've never had that before. It's peated, so it tastes quite like an Islay malt, but it's from the rugged, beautiful county of Connemara, so celebrated by Yeats with his Connemara fishermen. Anyway, I thought it'd be nice to read another little bit of The Voyage of the Dawntreader. Lucy, as her name implies, with that word light in it, Lucy is in a sense the most spiritually, naturally spiritually aware of all the children. She's the one who usually sees Aslan first. She's the one who often knows by instinct what they should do. And of course she has a wonderful role in a very key moment, I mean, quite a dark, literally dark moment, but beautiful moment, in The Voyage of the Dawntreader. The Voyage of the Dawntreader itself, of course, is deeply Irish in the sense that Lewis was certainly reading and channeling and, remaking some of the stories of the Navigatio of Brendan, the voyages of the Irish Saint Brendan, who goes off and has a series of magical adventures. But in the end, he also finds the Christ he might have thought he'd left behind. Anyway, the other thing that attracts me to The Voyage of the Dawntreader is that it's the book in which Lewis deftly and gently acknowledges his own debt to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and particularly to the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Indeed, the whole story of The Voyage of the Dawntreader starts with, in Coleridge's phrase, a painted ship upon a painted ocean. And but the place where we really touch the quick of Coleridge as Lewis read him is this episode of The Dark Island, where it turns out to be the island where dreams come true, but not just ordinary dreams, nightmares. And they row into this darkness by way of quest and adventure, but they become more and more terrified. And then eventually it's Lucy's light and vision that saves them. Oh no, I had the place marked here for you. Let me find it. Here we are. So they're in utter darkness and panicking, and here's where we'll take up the story. Lucy, up on the topmast, the stand of the mast, is praying, because there's nothing left for them to do. They're in a terrible state. They're going into a darkness out of which they fear they may never return. "Never get out," they yelled. That's it, of course. We shall never get out. What a fool I was to have thought they would let me go so easily. This is a voice of a man they've picked up, a kind of ancient mariner who's been brought on board ship, and he realises they may still be stuck in the nightmare. And here's where I'll pick up the reading. Lucy leant her head on the edge of the fighting top and whispered, "Aslan, Aslan, if ever you loved us at all, send us help now." The darkness did not grow any less, but she began to feel a very, very little better. After all, nothing has really happened to us yet, she thought. "Look!" cried Ranulph's voice hoarsely from the bows. There was a tiny speck of light ahead, and while they watched, a broad beam of light fell from it upon the ship. It did not alter the surrounding darkness, but the whole ship was lit up as if by a searchlight. Caspian blinked, stared round, saw the faces of his companions, all with wild, fixed expressions. Everyone was staring in the same direction. Behind everyone lay his black, sharply edged shadow. Lucy looked along the beam and presently saw something in it. At first, it looked like a cross, and then it looked like an aeroplane, and then it looked like a kite, and at last, with a whirring of wings, it was right overhead and was an albatross. It circled 3 times round the mast, and then perched for an instant on the crest of the gilded dragon on the prow. It called out in a strong, sweet voice what seemed to be words, though no one understood them. And after that it spread its wings, rose and began to fly slowly ahead, bearing a little to starboard. Drinian steered after it, not doubting that it offered good guidance, but no one, except Lucy, knew that as it circled the mast, it had whispered to her, "Courage, dear heart," and the voice, she felt sure, was Aslan's, and with the voice a delicious smell breathed in her face. In a few moments the darkness turned into a greyness ahead, and then almost before they dared to begin hoping, they had shot out into the sunlight and were in the warm blue world again. And all at once everybody realised that there was nothing to be afraid of, and never had been. They blinked their eyes and looked about them. The brightness of the ship herself astonished them. They had half expected to find that the darkness would cling to the white and green and the gold in the form of some grime or scum. And then first one, and then another, began laughing. It's a wonderful moment of what Tolkien called eucatastrophe, a sort of unexpectedly good thing happening. And I didn't read you the full account of the gradual move out of the grey into the darker and then the sense of lostness in darkness. Now, I read that when I was really quite a little boy, and I was very moved by it. But it was only much later, in my late teens and then into my early manhood, I began to understand a little bit of what that darkness is. And if you have ever, as I occasionally have, suffered from depression, then you'll know that image of being lost in this darkness, not thinking there could even, not even being able to remember light, and having a kind of panic that you'll never get out. All of that is incredibly well described. And of course it's an experience which in his own days Coleridge had. But of course, in Coleridge's poem, the ship is also lost and stuck and surrounded by ice. And again, the albatross comes and flies 3 times round and leads them through. The ice did split in a thunder fit, and the helmsman steered us through. And although Coleridge never makes it explicit, he constantly refers to the cross in the same breath as the albatross, even down to instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. And of course, in Coleridge's story, this bird that saves the ship is slain by one of the mariners. And then we hear later that the spirit that is all around her loved the bird that loved the man that shot him with his bow. So that implicitly and almost at a mythological level, the albatross in Coleridge's poem is a Christ figure. And of course, Lewis touches on that beautifully. In fact, I think apart from the time when at the very end of this book he appears as a lamb, this is the only place in the whole Narniad where Aslan appears as anything other than a lion. But she knows it's Aslan's voice, and just those 3 words, courage, dear heart are all that she needs. And I read it to you now partly because the nights are drawing in. It is dark. It's dark when I get up. It's dark when I come home from shopping. You know, it's mostly dark, and a lot of people can find that outer darkness just affects their inner mood as well. And that's when you need a story, a really great story, which takes the darkness seriously, but lets you know that it's not the end, that there is a way through. And even has this beautiful thing, everybody realised there had been nothing to be afraid of, and never had been. So you'll find out, I hope, when I finally publish my Arthurian stories, that I decided that I would tip the hat both to Lewis and to Coleridge, and have an episode in my story where the heroine, who's called Dawntreader, is born. He calls out for help from God, and an albatross comes. And in my story, it gives him further. She actually rides the albatross and is born on the back of the albatross to Solomon's ship. And of course, there's a very fine, I think, great contemporary writer amongst us now, Susanna Clarke. And if you ever know or read, I don't do any plot spoilers, but if you ever know or read her story, her book Piranesi, you'll find there is also suddenly a great albatross comes in that, and she's also, I'm sure, thinking both of Coleridge and Lewis. So it's a favourite episode. I'm afraid this is a rather brief visit, as I've got to pack for America tomorrow. But good to see you again, and nice to touch on Lewis. Perhaps I'll take the Voyage of the Dawntreader with me and re-enjoy it all. Anyway, as the Irish say, sláinte.